Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Robert. This is our Monet and Impressionism program at the fabulous Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Thanks for being here. My name is Robert. I'll be your host. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I was an art history major at the University of Michigan before transitioning off into the business world. And I spent the first 2 years of my career working at the Detroit Institute of Arts. And my favorite artist, not counting Claude Monet, I'll go with Frederick Remington. How about that? And we also have our fabulous friend Patty joining us. Hi, Patty. How are you? And do you have a favorite artist, not counting Claude Monet?
I'm very well today, and let's see. I think after last weekend, I'm still stuck on Georgia O'Keeffe.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. She's very talented.
Slightly.
And hi, Brad. How are you? Thanks for joining us. Where are you connecting from? And do you have a favorite art?
Hi, Robert. This is Brad. I'm calling in from Falling Waters, West Virginia. And my favorite artist, I guess I'll have to go with Andrew Wyeth because Monet's really my favorite. But he he's already taken by the program today.
Oh, I see. Okay, no problem. We should do a program on the Wyeths because they're a very talented artistic family.
Yes.
And then Patty, you mentioned George O'Keeffe. So if anyone missed it, we had a program last weekend on George O'Keeffe called Flowers and Abstractions, and I just posted it on our YouTube channel this morning. Sorry, I've been busy at work, so it was a little bit delayed. So you can check that out. And then speaking of programs on YouTube, we've actually done other Monet programs. So our first time we did a Monet program featuring his artwork at a specific museum was at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Then we went to the Art Institute of Chicago and talked about all the Monet paintings there. And today we're going to be talking about the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. If you want to watch these other two programs, they're on our YouTube channel, which is called Washington, D.C. History and Culture. I'll send a link out for that later on as soon as I upload this program also. All right, let's talk about Mr. Claude Monet. He was born in Paris. A lot of great artists that spend time in Paris are not from there. Like, for instance, Vincent van Gogh and Pablo Picasso and various others. But Claude Monet was actually born in Paris, and he spends the first few years of his life there. He was born on November 14th of 1840, and ironically enough, it was the same year this famous print was made of Paris. Now, if you're wondering, hey, if that's Paris, where's the Eiffel Tower? Well, they hadn't built the Eiffel Tower in 1840. That would come a little bit later. And then eventually the Monet family moves to northern France in a place called Le Havre. Claude Monet's father was a successful businessman, and he was in the maritime mercantile business, meaning he sold supplies and equipment to boats and ships and things like that. And of course, there's a lot more of those in northern France along the coast than there are in Paris. And so he moved the family business. And speaking of Monet's parents, there are the two of them. That's a photo of Claude Monet's father and mother on the left, and then a painting that Claude Monet did of his father several years later. Unfortunately, Claude Monet's mom, who he was very close to and was very supportive of him, passed away when he was a teenager. And Claude Monet and his father did not have the best of relationships. They did get along sometimes, but it was a little bit rocky also periodically because Claude Monet's father wanted him, Claude, to take over the family business. Instead, Claude decided he was going to be an artist, which didn't sit well with his father. And so they clashed frequently on that, especially because during Monet's early career, he struggled a lot financially. And so it's unfortunate Monet did he became a successful, wealthy artist during his own lifetime, but unfortunately, his parents did not live long enough to see that happen. And who do you think this guy is? It's actually Claude Monet as a young man. And he knew from his teenage years he wanted to be an artist. And he pursued that with all of his gusto, so to speak. Now, for me personally, my opinion, when people think of Claude Monet, they usually think of flowers, gardens and landscape paintings because these are amongst his most well-known works. And while he did paint many, many paintings in these subjects, he also did a lot of other things. So we're going to see these paintings today, but we're also going to see things on various other subjects. So you don't want to typecast Claude Monet as just strictly a guy who made paintings of flowers, gardens, and landscapes, because he did so many different types of things, including a lot of paintings of architecture. He was very fascinated by architecture, which is an interesting contrast from landscapes and gardens. He was also interested in people. He does numerous portraits of people throughout his career, oftentimes family members or friends that he was close to. He does a lot of paintings, or did a lot of paintings that have water in them. So you should really be on the lookout for this. I'd love to do a study to see what percentage of the Claude Monet paintings he made during his lifetime have water in them, because it's a really large percent. So something for you to be on the lookout for. And all these paintings I'm showing you now, we'll look at in more detail in just a little bit. They're all in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And let's go through Claude Monet's artwork in mostly a chronological order, so you can see how his style and artwork changes and develops and evolves over time. And as always, Brad and Patty, feel free to chime in whenever you see anything interesting or noteworthy. So let's talk about the early years of Claude Monet. And here is the earliest painting of his that's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It was his family doctor, and he painted this in 1864. For Americans joining us, that was the year the Civil War was raging. Not that the Civil War really has anything to do with Claude Monet, but just to give you that historical context. And Claude Monet is known as the father of Impressionism. However, this painting was done well before Impressionism was invented, so to speak. Impressionism comes along in like the early 1870s. And because this painting was done well before that, it's considered a pre-Impressionist painting. And Claude Monet was 24 years old at this point in time. And what was before Impressionism? Well, it was just the traditional art style of the day. And so you see a lot of artworks by Monet and others that have kind of this dark earth tone background and this kind of like single source lighting with a solitary figure, etc. And like, for instance, one of the most famous paintings at the Met is this portrait by Velázquez. And if you've seen this before, it's one of their well-known works museum. It's not a French Impressionist painting. I'm just strictly showing it to you for comparison and contrast purposes. So this painting is from 1650. And then you look at the Monet painting from several years later, and you can see a lot of similarities. So early on, Monet, he's making paintings in kind of a very traditional style, so to speak.
Robert, is it fair to say that prior to Impressionism, that landscape focused painting was not particularly common?
Oh, yeah, great point. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It kind of depends on the artist and the period. But yeah, landscape painting oftentimes throughout history has not been held in as high regard as some other versions, like history painting. For most of history, up until the past, say, like 200 years, was always considered like, oh, the best kind of artwork you can make. But yeah, landscape painting, not the greatest at that point in time.
The Hudson Valley School seems like a notable exception to me. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah, yeah, that really put things on the map, so to speak, in America. And then even the Impressionists, they really changed the impact of landscape painting, just because they were painting outdoors and they're doing all these different landscape paintings. So yeah, that's a great point. So you don't really see landscape paintings throughout history consistently. You do in different periods, but not consistently throughout time. And then speaking of landscapes, here's one that Monet did himself. This is a forest that was southwest, or is, it's still there, southwest of Paris. And so he does this landscape. And again, it's kind of very traditional style, done in 1865. And very nicely done, but very different than his later works, which we'll see shortly. And then this is an unusual painting. I'm guessing if you walked up to a bunch of different people at the Met and asked them who made this painting, if if they weren't familiar with Claude Monet, they wouldn't have guessed him. So this is from the late 1860s, again, pre-Impressionism. But as he does throughout his career, he features water in this painting.
And light. Yeah.
Yeah, and light. Yeah, great point. Thank you, Patty. Appreciate that. Yeah, and light. You can always already see his early interest in depicting light. The reasons why he liked water is, for one thing, he just always lived near the water. So he either lived in northern France along the Channel, or he lived near the Seine River. So that was one reason why he liked it. Another reason was because he liked how light and water changed over time. And of course, if you have light shining on water, it's constantly moving. And he was really fascinated by that. And of course, water is very beautiful. And so here's some sailboats. And I like to show these paintings just because people might not have been familiar with these early works of his, but it kind of give you a starting point. All right, so here's a place in northern France called Saint-André, and Monet ends up living near here. So he grew up not far from here. This particular city is traditionally been a resort town, and he ends up making a lot of paintings here throughout his career, including these two, which are really considered masterpieces of Monet's early career. So let's take a look at these two. Here's the first one. This is a garden scene, and it's a garden along the waterfront. And you have some people here, and they're hanging out in the garden. And then off in the distance, you can see water and boats and things like that. And so again, this is a seascape. It's along the Normandy coast. It's a resort area. Once again, we see water. And Monet, like many of the Impressionist painters, was really influenced by Japanese art. And so you show you a classic example of perhaps the influence in just one moment. But this is, again, really considered one of Monet's many masterpieces. It's hard to say which painting of his is the most famous or most important. But there's a handful, and if you had to make a list, this one would be on that list. And it's a really beautifully done work. It's got great light, as Patty mentioned, beautiful colors, the people, the gardens, the boats, the sky, just really kind of a rainbow of all these different colors and artistic effects taking place here. And then if you want to know where this geographic area is, so here's Paris, and here's London for our friends in England. And then this is the Normandy coast where the battle took place near Saint-André. Monet spent the summer of 1867 with his family at Saint-André, a seaside resort near Le Havre, which is where Monet spent most of his childhood. It was there that he painted this buoyant, sunlit scene of contemporary leisure, enlisting his father, shown seated in a Panama hat, and other relatives as models. By adopting an elevated viewpoint, which is interesting in and of itself, the painting, the terrace, sea, and sky as three distinct bands of high-keyed color. So here's the land, one band. Here's the water, a second band. Here's the sky, a three band. That's interesting. Let's see, Monet emphasized the flat surface of the canvas. His approach, daring for its time, reflects his admiration for Japanese prints. And here's a famous Japanese print of Mount Fuji by the great artist Kasai. And if you look at this painting or artwork, you have some people, and they're on a terrace, and they're overlooking the water and Mount Fuji off in the distance. And then here's the Monet painting. And not that he's copying the Japanese work, but people have often wondered, wonder if he got any inspiration from the print, because Monet was very fond of Japanese art. He had Japanese artworks hanging in his house. And so this was a very famous print. So some people have wondered, wonder if he got any kind of inspiration or ideas. Now they don't have anything that looks like Mount Fuji in northern France, but they have a lot of other cool stuff, including water and boats and all that type of thing. And then really interesting that his father is included in the painting because they had somewhat of a challenging relationship.
Interesting, Robert, that both of them incorporate a technique where it extend elements of the lowest level into the uppermost level. I think
Yeah,
it would entirely change the picture, the painting, if you didn't do that.
Yeah, it is. It is really cool how it also, it has kind of the elevated look, and you're looking down, the horizon is far off in the distance. So I mean, there's are other paintings that kind of look like this, but it is somewhat unique to have this type of setup. And here you go. And you have the French tricolor flag on the right. People aren't quite sure what the flag is on the left. Some people have
It's a
theorized.
nautical flag.
What's that?
It looks like a nautical flag because it's triangular.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point, Petty. That's what actually a lot of people have theorized. It might have something to do with the boats off in the distance.
But I definitely think it would appear much flatter if you didn't have that lowest most element extended all the way through the three layers.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And so again, you see water over and over again. So if you were to see this painting like hanging on the wall of a museum, you might like, oh wow, that's really nice and beautiful, and just notice the water, but not realize how frequently he includes the water in his artworks. Someone's asked me about my pronunciation. I American, so I use the American pronunciation. I don't use the French pronunciation. So sorry if that bothers someone. I say Van Gogh, for instance. I don't say Van Gogh because I'm not European. But if someone wants to pronounce it that way, that's totally fine. And again, you frequently see flowers and gardens and things in Monet's paintings, including the flowers here. So a nice, beautiful garden. It looks like a nice place to spend a nice sunny afternoon along the water, enjoying the flowers and the company of the people and the water and the boats off in the distance. All right, so here you go, the early years of Claude Monet. Patty and Brad, any other thoughts on these early paintings?
No, I just like I said, I'm kind of fascinated with that idea because I don't think I ever registered it before. That idea of you of emphasizing the flat canvas, but also keeping the life in it by extending one of the elements all the way through.
Yeah, because it's kind of unusual. I mean, you see it sometimes. It's not like it's completely uncommon, but it's kind of more frequent just to see people using more of that, what you'd call it, a traditional um, perspective type of thing.
Yeah,
What
frame.
what what drew your interest in that one? Anything in particular?
No, no. When you flash the that's not a nice word. When you showed the picture of that compared it to the Japanese scene that was similar in terms of its setting, it popped right out at me. I'm like, oh yeah, both of them. Even though the flat canvas is the issue, and we're talking about the similarity of the scene, I don't think either one of them would be as have as much impact without that element that connects all three together.
Yeah, and that is a great point. It is a flat canvas, but yet, wow, this looks really three-dimensional, and it takes a lot of skill to be able to make that look realistic, so to speak. So, good job, Mr. Monet.
And
Brad, any other thoughts from you?
yeah, I was thinking of the one before this, the one of the sailboat. Last art thing we did on Remington, we were talking about his ability to show the motion in the horses.
Oh
And
yeah, and
it
this
looked
is a
good.
little bit different. The motion of the waves and the boats.
Well, yeah, he's got the three-dimensional waves of a sailboat cutting through a fairly strong wind
Mhm.
on this, and he's done a really good job with it.
Oh, I didn't make that connection with the horses, but yeah, you're right. It is interesting how he's captured, which is not an easy thing to do unless you're a talented artist. But yeah, the boats definitely aren't stationary, and then the waves look pretty. It looks like a pretty strong
Yeah, that
breeze that day with the
healed
waves.
over.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So, all right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Let's continue on. All right, so let's call these paintings, I don't know, pre-Impressionism. He made these shortly before Impressionism took hold. And during this point in time in his career, he's really experimenting with different things and different styles, sometimes with friends of his, which would also become famous artists. And here are two well-known Monet works that are kind of companion paintings. One of them at the left is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the other one is at another one of my favorite places, the Art Institute of Chicago. So same subject matter, same location, same artist, same time frame, but just two different museums. And so interesting kind of compare and contrast between these two early, well-known Claude Monet paintings. All right, here you go. This is a regatta scene, and it's another seascape along the Normandy coast. Once again, water is in the subject. And of course, there's the Art Institute Chicago version. And so again, this is a popular resort area. A lot of well-to-do people have vacationed here throughout the years, including even into today. And again, this is not far from where Monet grew up. Remember, he was born in Paris, but when he was a young boy, his family moved to northern France. So he was very familiar with this area. He spends a lot of time here throughout his life, and he ends up painting scenes here on a regular basis. And here was a letter he wrote to one of his friends. Among the seascapes, I am doing the regattas of La Havre, with many figures on the beach and the outer harbor covered with small sails. And it's a really beautiful painting. I love the combination of the water with the cloudy sky and the boats and the people and the sunshine and the light. It's a great package of artistic effects that he's included here. And then just for a comparison and contrast, here's the famous one that's at the Art Institute Chicago. And notice this one is very similar, but also very different. It has a much darker, cloudier sky versus the more light-filled one at the Met. And here they are side by side.
All the similarities, and yet there's no doubt possible that they're two different temperatures.
Yeah. Yeah, the scene's very similar. And sometimes like for myself, when I see an artist, they've made two kind of similar paintings, they're very, very similar. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I could just look at one of them and kind of get the idea. But this one, they're very different. The approach that he took, and like you were saying, the climate and etc. So well done. And again, this is from 1867. Another thing too is like if you're to look at this, where does your eye focus? For most people, our vision tends to start in the top left of something and kind of work our way either down or across or diagonally. With this work, just because there's so many things going on, my eyes are kind of darting all over the place. I'm looking at the boats and the people and the sky and the water. Interesting in that regard. And then the horizon line, we were talking before about the other painting was somewhat elevated. This one is a little bit more of traditional. The horizon line is where the sky meets the land, so to speak. And he devotes quite a bit of the painting to the sky, which in and of itself is interesting just because you would think that traditionally the people, the water, and the boats would be like the main point of emphasis, but yet he includes a large portion of the painting is devoted to the sky and the clouds and all that kind of stuff. So kind of the horizon line is something maybe you want to look at if you're looking at paintings, just because it can kind of give you some maybe interesting perspective on what the artist was trying to focus on.
And yeah, so he uses the techniques of impressionism to convey a really reality sense. There's a lot of activity, a lot of life going on in this.
Yeah, you can almost hear the hear
Yeah.
the activity taking place.
And it's all interconnected. You've got a village in the background. You've got people using the water for water things. And of course, shipping was very important at that era. And you've also got human beings that are a part of the whole scene.
Oh yeah, I'd like to be here. I mean, this looks like a nice, pleasant day along the water. And then here's a close-up of the people. I always find it funny to look at these historical artworks and see how well-dressed people are. Now they'd have t-shirts and cut-off shorts and flip-flops and stuff. Got women with dresses and parasols and men with jackets and top hats.
Yeah, you definitely don't see people in the water other than the people sort of working with the boat, which that would be launching a boat type of thing, but
Yeah, mhm,
nobody recreating in the water.
right. And there are the boats.
That could be a whole painting by itself, but it wouldn't be quite as exciting.
Yeah, it wouldn't be quite as intriguing and maybe wouldn't keep your attention as long. But yeah, just I could look at just this one by itself. And there you have it. So again, one of the great early paintings by Claude Monet. All right, so Claude Monet was friends with many other artists, some of whom became very famous, including Renoir. So Monet and Renoir, they have a long-term um, relationship. There was a time early in their career they were almost like brothers. That's how close they were, and they spent a lot of time talking about their ideas with art. They both wanted to kind of change and shake up the traditional and establishment, so to speak. And they would frequently go venture out to places together. And it's really cool when the two of them would make paintings of the same subject. You can compare and contrast it. So kind of like how we just did the compare and contrast on two different Monet paintings. How about we do the same thing on two different paintings by Claude Monet of the same scene, but a little bit different. So this also is like another resort kind of area, Grenier, and this is outside of Paris. And this painting is at the National Gallery in London for our friends in England. This one's at the Met in New York. And how this works is there was this kind of like boat house, and then there was like a little island here, and they had a bridge, and the land is over here. So the bridge would extend out from the land across here to the little island, and then there'd be another short bridge to the boathouse. And over and here on the right, there'd be drinking and dining and dancing and people talking and stuff like that. So this is almost like a panorama scene that he split up into two different paintings. So again, this one's at the National Gallery in London. And here's the one at the Met. And one of the things that Monet and the Impressionists are really interested in is kind of documenting the modern Paris life, so to speak. We were talking before about landscape paintings. Prior to Impressionism, history painting was one of the big genres where people would do paintings from stories from the Bible or Greek and Roman mythology or important battles and things like that. The Impressionists aren't interested in any of that stuff for the most part, but they are really interested in just kind of what's going on in modern Paris, kind of like everyday life. And so here is a scene of dining and drinking and dancing, and then also people in the water with the boating and the fishing and swimming and all the other stuff that comes with that. Here's actually an advertisement for this spot. So you can see here's that island that I was referring to, and then there was this little bridge kind of thing that went to this floating kind of dock that would have the music and the dining and dancing and drinking, all that stuff. And then, of course, there's people swimming and boating and all that kind of stuff. And then here's the one Monet painting.
There's no doubt. I mean, we started off looking at the ocean side ones. And there's absolutely no doubt, and yet he goes back and forth so fluidly that this is either a pond or a river. You can't necessarily tell which one. It's more likely a river, but
Yeah, that is a good point. Like, I agree. You can definitely tell that, but like, why can you tell that? I really don't know.
and how and the fact that
Same
he
thing
was
here.
able to convey both so fluidly and efficiently.
Yeah, maybe because the water's a little calmer.
It's everything. It's the entertainment going on. You wouldn't have structures like that at a ocean shore because they can't really go out into the water because of the
Hmm.
waves. You have like a what do you call it, a pier, but that's completely different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very, very different. Now, you may have heard this term where the impressionist artists they're going out and they're painting the works on site called plein air. He didn't do that here. He basically visited this place, made drawings and sketches, and they would take them back to his studio and do the works there. So while Monet does do a number of paintings on site, this particular one, just FYI, he didn't paint this here, but he was with his friend Renoir, and they're documenting the Paris life. And oh, by the way, Renoir made a same painting of the same exact spot, which is on the right. This is from a museum in Stockholm. So here's the island again with the bridges and the people and the boats, and then the kind of the floating dock here. And kind of really interesting compare and contrast between the great friends Monet and Renoir. So
Somebody earlier
like
had commented about the up close nature of George O'Keeffe's flower paintings, the intimacy. That's exactly what you see in the difference here. The Renoir is just far more intimate.
Oh, you know, good point. Yeah, you have more of a close up view. But you got to think they're standing in the same spot. I mean, maybe Monet or maybe Renoir crawled into one of these boats to get a better vantage point. But I kind of maybe picture the two of them sitting or standing there side by side, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Monet was also very interested in things like trees, and of course, there's a much more expansive water here. It's you can tell what Renoir's painting is water, but that's not his focal point. And we've talked a lot in the past about, Renoir tended to focus a lot more on people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a good point. When you're looking at a painting, you should kind of think about that. Like, hey, what is the focus of this? I mean, there might be a lot of different things in a painting or an artwork, or even a photograph. But what is the artist really trying to get you to focus on? Like, what's the emphasis? So, kudos to
Yeah,
you, Patty. Good point.
yeah, Monet has that series of poplar trees too, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah. We'll be
And
talking about that a little bit later.
all of those things fascinated him, whereas Renoir he always seems to have people involved in whatever he's painting. They
Hmm.
tend to be part of the importance of the painting.
So here's the Monet one. Here's the Renoir one.
There's a perfect example. See that whatever that square arrangement is, like to the right of the painting. If you show them both side by side, it's in both of them, but it looks completely different.
Hmm. Yeah, there's much more of an emphasis on it over here.
See that on the right, it almost looks like some sort of a gate if you just look at that. Whereas in the Monet one, it like fades into the. Oh yeah, I see how that works in that photo. Yeah, in that painting. I mean,
And
interesting.
where did this boat go? It disappeared.
Mhm.
All right, so it's really cool. Kind of side by side. Monet traveled a lot. So in an era before airplanes, people didn't venture out as much from home as they do today. But he actually was pretty well traveled, and at one point in time in his life, actually a couple different times, he ends up visiting the Netherlands, and he paints some houses along a canal with water once again. So again, this is probably considered pre-impressionism, but it's from the Netherlands, and he travels frequently through Europe. Unfortunately, Monet never visited America. It would have been great if he would have come to the United States, but never made it there. But once again, water is the subject. And here's a letter he wrote to his friend Camille Pissarro, another great friend of his and fellow artist who also would become a famous impressionist. They're a superb place for painting. There are most amusing things everywhere, hundreds of windmills and enchanting boats, extremely friendly Dutchmen.
One of our viewers just made a point that this being Van Gogh's home country, none of Van Gogh's Netherlands paintings look anything like this.
Oh yeah, that is a good point. He focused on a lot of different types of things, not anything like this. And the full view. And then this is an interesting work. This is of his son Jean, and was done in 1872. Jean was the oldest of his two sons. And interestingly enough, Claude Monet, as far as we know, never offered this painting for sale. It was actually in his bedroom when he died. And, they had photography at this point in time in history, but some people have thought that maybe he had a lot of sentimental attachment to this painting because, as far as they know, it was never put up for sale. So, how about that? And it's his son riding on the hobby horse.
Before we separated hobby horses from tricycles.
Yeah, when did that happen?
I have no idea. That's a subject for another program.
Okay.
History and culture. The mystery of separating hobby horses from tricycles.
So very nicely done. If you go back, you'll see that Claude Monet had two sons, and he passed away in 1926. His oldest son passed away in 1914, so he actually outlived his oldest son, and he actually also outlived his first wife. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
His younger son was the one that did most of the preservation and museum work, right?
Yeah, yep. You're all indebted to him. So, any thoughts on this collection of pre-impressionism paintings, Patty or Brad?
You can see the elements of where he would eventually be going kind of lining up in these paintings.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's kind of that's why I like to look at these early works, not just from him, but from any artist. You can, if you kind of know where things head, you can kind of like get a hint of things to come, so to speak. What about you, Brad? Any thoughts on the pre-impressionism paintings?
Yeah, I was especially impressed with the comparison between Renoir and Monet here because, as everybody was noting, Renoir really focused on the people, and maybe that tree was a little more spectacular. Otherwise, I'm really impressed with his pre-impressionism work, and of course, impressionism is what made him famous. So
And you also too, you kind of have to wonder, okay, so these two guys, Renoir and Monet, they end up becoming famous art. How much did they influence each other, and what kind of impact did they have? Just because you got to think, if you're an artist and you get to spend time with Claude Monet or Pierre Auguste Renoir, then that's got to be helpful for your career. So really cool that the two of them were kind of sharing ideas and critiquing these others' works and things like that. So it had to be beneficial for both of them because they both ended up becoming great, famous artists.
and if they were standing right next to each other when they did those paintings, that's really fantastic.
Yeah, there's quite a few artworks in history where two different artists have made a depiction of the same spot, but it was many years later or a century later. The fact that they were there at the same time, that's really cool and unique.
Well, something I'm not sure if that's what you said, Brad, but Monet did become famous and successful mostly on the basis of his impressionism, but wasn't he at least somewhat well known and successful prior to, which gave him kind of the necessary leave to go into more experimental painting?
Yeah, he did. So they were both really starving artists at the time. They go back to the painting. They were, oops. At the time they were making this painting, they were both really starving artists. A little bit different because Monet came from a very wealthy family, although he was cut off from them for the most part. Renoir's family wasn't as wealthy, but they were more supportive of him. And there's a funny story when Monet and his first wife had their first son. They lived not far from Renoir, and Renoir would bring over like leftovers to the Monets because he was really worried about their son not having enough to eat. I mean, that kind of shows you how close um, that they were. But yeah, the fact that if you get more money coming in, it allows you to maybe be a little bit more experimental, so to speak. And I also think that Renoir was a great portrait painter, and so he made while he was doing impressionist paintings of landscapes and flowers and things, he was really bringing in a lot of money early on in his career as a portrait artist. And Monet was to a certain degree, but not to the extent. I mean, I'm guessing if you had to pick a point in time early in their careers, Renoir was actually bringing in more money, a lot more money than Monet was, just because of all his portraits that he did. So kind of interesting compare and contrast between those two. All right, well, let's continue on. This is probably the most famous Claude Monet impressionist painting from early in his career. And for art historians, they really kind of tend this to be like, okay, this is really like the first impressionist painting. Like there were other works that were kind of going in that direction. But this is really like the one that kind of flipped the switch, so to speak, partially just because the term impressionism actually came from this painting. A critic looked at it and said, oh, that's not even a real painting. That's just like an impression of a painting. And the name kind of stuck. And so Monet is considered the father of Impressionism because, number one, he ends up making this painting, which is kind of considered the first official Impressionist painting. Number two, he's very prolific. And then he's also really influential early in the Impressionist movement versus, say, someone like Van Gogh, who also was really influential, but he came later on down the road, so to speak. So just wanted to include this one, even though it's not at the Met, just so you can kind of get a sense of how all this kind of fits together. This is a beautiful painting.
It's near the ocean. That I don't know. I think I've talked to you guys about the way the fog breathes here. That's one of the most fascinating things. And of course, a lot
Yeah.
of times your fog is in the morning.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
great impression of what seaside sunrises are often like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And once again, we're seeing water in the painting. So again, not a painting at the Met, but just want to include it just because it's such an important work. So from here on out, we'll kind of consider the paintings impressionists. And then here's another person that Monet was friends with, the great artist Manet. And so Manet visited Monet at his home one day, and his wife and son were just relaxing, and he's working on the garden. So this is not a Monet, not a painting by Monet, but it's a painting of Monet by Manet that you can go see when you're at the Met.
This is one of those first who's on first presentations.
Yeah, right, exactly. So Monet was friends with Manet and Renoir and Pissarro and Cezanne and many of the other artists. So I wanted to include this, even though it's not by Monet, it's by Manet, but it includes Monet. And a close-up of his wife and son. He left the hobby horse behind and hanging out with his mom.
This is the same sun that's depicted in that hilltop painting, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep. And then this is an interesting, noteworthy. This is the only painting of Claude Monet gardening. There's a lot of paintings of his garden and a lot of paintings of him doing different things. This is the only painting of him actually gardening. Interesting enough. All right, let's talk about early Impressionism. And again, Impressionism kind of gets started around the early 1870s. A lot of people like it for a variety of reasons. Number one, usually the beautiful colors. It's kind of the early stages of abstract modern art, among other things. So we'll look at these three paintings and these three, and we'll kind of call all of them early Impressionism. All right, so here we go. This is his wife, Camille, and she's front and center in the painting on the left, and she's over on the left of the painting, the right side painting. And these are both paintings that were done in Monet's garden. So Monet is known for his garden at Giverny. That would be a real thing, but this is many, many years earlier. The Giverny garden wouldn't come till kind of like the second half of his life. So this is pre-Giverny. And this is Camille Monet on a garden bench, 1873. Again, there's people depicted here, and the gardens. I really love the beautiful clothes that they're all wearing. His wife is beautifully dressed. You have this gentleman with the top hat and the coat, and then off in the distance, you have another beautifully dressed woman with a parasol. And the thing that's unusual, this one though, it has kind of a contrasting mood, in my opinion. On the one hand, you can see the beautiful gardens and the flowers in the background, but when you zoom in and look at Camille's face, she's very sad. And there's a reason for that, is because her father had just passed away. It's thought that they had come home from the funeral at this point in time. So you can see she has a very sad look in her face. And it's thought that maybe perhaps the neighbor came over to pay his condolences, perhaps even to give her these flowers. It's hard to see, but she's actually holding a piece of paper in her hand. And then off in the distance, there's another woman with a beautiful garden. So kind of an interesting contrast between the beautiful flowers and the sunshine and the sad expression on his wife's face. I kind of almost wonder if she's like, hey, can we take a break from the posing for the paintings? My dad just died, for God's sake. Monet's wife, Camille, is as easily identifiable here as the mounds of geraniums in the garden of the couple's home. The same is true of her smart ensemble. The velvet and damask outfit closely resembles the look for spring 1873 as advertised in Paris fashion periodicals. At this point in time, Monet was bringing in a decent amount of money. He wasn't wealthy, but he was at least able to support himself and his family. Painted the year Camille's father died, she telegraphed sadness while holding a note in her gloved hand. The top-headed gentleman, a neighbor, has perhaps called to offer his condolences in a consoling bouquet. And another thing, too, this is the Victorian era, so you don't really have people smiling and laughing and carrying on like they do now when you're posing for photos or things like that. So another kind of reason why she would maybe have more of a serious look.
Well, those dark circles around her eyes, though, leave no doubt.
Yeah, that helps kind of set the mood as well. And just, she kind of looks like she's a little, I don't know, annoyed or perturbed, in my opinion.
Yeah, Margaret saying he got the sorrow well, definitely.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Margaret. And yeah, so this is what's funny about looking at artwork. Like if you were to look at this and see it on the wall, like, oh, okay, this, but then if you kind of know the backstory that her father had just passed away, and she's usually depicted. There are paintings of her where she's smiling, but that's actually not the case here. So interesting backstory on this one. And then here's another work of her, although she's kind of a secondary figure to the garden. So this is the house that they're renting in the background. And this is a place called Argenteuil. It's northwest of Paris. Now it's really part of like a suburb of Paris, like an outer suburb of Paris. When the Monets were living there, though, it was kind of a separate little small town outside of Paris. And this is where he's residing at the time. So here's their house in the background, and then this beautiful garden, and then here's his wife, Camille.
Prior to urban sprawl.
Yeah, urban sprawl, right? Exactly. So if you kind of look at this, you think, well, gee, is this a landscape painting of his garden? Is it a portrait of his wife? Is it both? I don't know. And then if you're interested, the flowers in the center are hollyhocks.
What's interesting in among these three, not so much the one with Camille centered, but these other two are that they definitely have elements of pointillism, which I don't think people necessarily associate with Monet.
Yeah, no, they sure don't. And I'd like to do a program on vandalism someday. Just haven't gotten to that just yet. And again, a beautiful scene. There's a I used to work at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and they have a similar painting. It's a horizontal work, though, of his wife in their garden. I should have brought that in as a compare and contrast, but maybe next time. And then you zoom in on her. She ended up being included in over 50 paintings that Claude Monet made throughout his career. So we've seen two here.
Must have liked her almost as much as flowers.
Right, exactly. And so there you go.
You can
Camille.
see that slightly pointillist look on the with the one with Camille, but it's nowhere near um, as emphasized on the
Mhm.
one it is in the one on the right. Even I think you showed during the O'Keeffe program, you had contrasted one of her flower still lifes with a Van Gogh and a Monet,
Oh
and
yeah, yep.
that Monet bouquet or arrangement definitely had a pointillist vibe to it.
Oh yeah, and we're gonna see that painting in just a little bit.
Oh, I'm
And
prescient.
and then here's another scene from Argenteuil. Spring, Fruit Trees in Bloom from 1873. And this is actually, ironically enough, this is the first Monet painting that the Metropolitan Museum of Art obtained for their collection. And they did it way back in 1926. So that was the year Monet died. So Monet was a successful artist in his middle and later years. In fact, in his later years, he was extremely wealthy. But there was a time when he was not doing this well financially, but he was well known. And so kind of interesting that they didn't acquire one of his, I mean, the Mets it's definitely the most famous art museum in America, and it's if it's not the most famous art museum in the world, it's right up there with the Louvre. So interesting that it took him to pass away before they acquired a painting of his in their collection. Oops, went the wrong way. And so these flowering trees in the spring bloom and great colors. No water in this one though. We're a little bit of a slump seeing water, but we'll get back to it shortly. And then here, the painting on the right is pretty well known, but the painting on the left is one of Monet's most famous works. That's hard to categorize anything that way just because he made so many famous works. But the one on the left is really considered a masterpiece. Not that the one on the right isn't, but just kind of wanted to give you the compare and contrast between his works, Poppy Fields. And so, as we were talking before, here's his wife once again, their son, and then there's a woman here. Kind of maybe it might be her, but it's a little bit impressionistic. Might be a little bit hard to tell, but perhaps her.
Well, there's another mother and child further up the hill
Oh
in the
yeah, right
line.
here. Yep. Yeah. Who are these two people? We don't know. And then here's the one at the Met. And I really like the colors on this painting. Look at the rainbow of greens and blues and reds and yellows and the cloudy sky and the sunshine.
And yet each of the elements, other than maybe the trees, you could say is very subtle, but together they're like there's a super vibrancy to them.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. So again, really beautiful work. So again, I don't mean to diminish this work because it is a great painting. It's a well-known painting of his. It's just the one at the Musée d'Orsay is extremely well known. Like the French government made a stamp of this particular painting.
Interesting. Not the one with the two of them on the top of the hill?
Um, well, they made a stamp of this painting, which I get makes sense because it's in the collection at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris.
Oh, yes.
That so
And
close enough.
in this one, the colors almost seem to be in stripes, whereas the other one, it's overtaking the field, which is
Oh, yeah, you're right.
it almost seems like that's what it actually would be in the spring when the poppies pop.
hmm When the poppies pop.
or the what are those if those are poppies or are they
Oh yeah,
opium
no, these are poppies. Yeah, because the paintings are called poppy field. But it kind of reminds me when we were looking before of the two paintings,
poppies? Yeah.
shore of how they're both similar, but they're very, very different.
Poppies were very widespread in Europe. That's one of the reasons why they're the symbol from World War One.
Yeah, the memory poppies.
And
In
then
flame.
here's some more garden views and painting on the right, a little get together. So this is a landscape painting. This was a area in Paris. And so at this point in time, Monet, he's really traveling around the different areas, mostly in northern France, but not always. He does, even though he does not live in Paris, he spends a lot of time there. So this is a garden in Paris, and really great depiction of light and color, which are kind of two things that you see over and over again in Monet paintings. He was really fascinated by light, and he loved color, and so he's really interested in how light changes and the visual, say, interpretation of color. And then here's another one, same location. This one a little more Renoir-esque in the sense that he's focusing on the people a little bit more than he did the other one. And he's depicting this modern urban life of people, middle class people, upper middle class people, kind of enjoying the urban leisure, so to speak.
Yeah, this was during the Gilded Age. Um, so the bourgeoisie, the middle class was, I think this is the first experience of middle class life.
Oh yeah, yep. So again, it's always neat to me when, yeah, you look at one painting, it's really nice, but when you can see two that are similar, kind of gives you more of a broad perspective on the artist and what they're trying to do. And interesting that, the one on the left is horizontal, the one on the right's a vertical, the one on the right has much more emphasis on the people than the one on the left, but also at the same time, they're very um, compatible with each other, complement each other well.
Helen is making a comment that I think comes up in every single Monet program we do. I like how one can feel the temperature and wind of that day. Light and
Oh
colors.
yeah,
That
yeah, that
that
is a.
comes.
What's
Go
that, Patty?
ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, no, you
That
first.
comes up in just about every single Monet program we've done.
That is a great point. It's, I mean, you have to feel like, wow, you could really get a sense of what the weather is like when you're looking at a canvas with paint on it. That's some real talent that it takes to do that.
He gives an impression of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So again, these are kind of early impressionist works. We saw these three, and then we saw these three. And unfortunately, Camille Monet passed away in 1879. She had a lot of health issues, and this really devastated Claude Monet. She was with him from early on in his career, and she was very supportive of him. She probably could have complained a lot about how early in their marriage they didn't have any money. Monet was so broke that he actually got evicted from places that he lived at more than once. I think like two or three times. Um, One time he owed a guy some rent, and he offered him his paintings as compensation. The guy essentially said, "Listen, Monet, I don't want your stupid paintings. I just want my money." And then there was another time he came home and all of his stuff was essentially on the sidewalk. He had been evicted. His stuff was all moved. So she stuck with him and was very supportive of him. But then eventually she ends up passing away. And at this point in time in his career, he's selling a few paintings, but he's not doing, he's not wealthy by any means. But when his wife died, he was really devastated. In fact, he actually attempted suicide. He was so distraught. But fortunately, he was not successful in that endeavor. And then he ended up continuing on. So it's nice that they have two of the 50 plus paintings of Camille, although the one that we saw with the woman in the poppy field might be her also. She had a lot of health issues, and when she had her second child, she didn't die from the birth of the second child, but her health really went downhill after that, and she died, I think, less than a year after the birth of her second son, which leaves Claude Monet a widower with two small children to feed. But life continues on. So then he ends up moving to a place called Batoy, which is also northwest of Paris, and it's also along the Seine River. And he ends up making a number of paintings of the Seine at Batoy. So if you're not familiar with France, I hope I don't offend anybody in France, but the Seine River is kind of like the Mississippi River of France, not exactly, but it's like the main river. It's really important throughout history. It runs through Paris. And so Monet ends up making numerous paintings of the Seine, including these ones when he was living at Batoy. And he would end up living there for 3 years. And I always wonder if he had a strong attachment to this place, not only because it was beautiful and it was along the water, but it was where his wife was buried. She was buried at Toy. And so he ends up making a number of paintings here. You kind of have to wonder if he was sentimental about that, because he makes numerous paintings within like a mile or a kilometer of this um, church where his wife is buried. And even before she passed away, they would spend time here because he has paintings of her like when they're out on dates, essentially, before they were married. So you kind of have to wonder what the maybe psychological impact was of him painting these scenes here over and over again.
Yeah, people are I was thinking like melancholy, and Helen saying loneliness, and I forget what somebody just before that used a good word too. Hold on. Oh, romanticize, which melancholy
Oh
is a
yeah.
romantic type of sentiment. Yeah.
You can see it, but the church in the background is where his wife's body is buried. And
There are
again, this,
no
oh, go
people
ahead,
in.
Patty.
Oh, there's notably no people in these. Even these people are very, very indistinct.
Yeah, very minimal.
Yeah.
But once again, water over and over and over again in these different paintings. And then this what we were talking about before, where he's still life. So he has kind of an interesting shift a little bit for a while in his artistic career, where he really kind of spends more time doing indoor paintings. You know, he's doing all these landscapes and flowers and things outdoors. And when his wife passed away, which is another reason why people maybe think he was seriously depressed, including the fact that he attempted suicide. He does all these painting indoors. You kind of have to wonder, like, well, gee, was he so, exhausted and tired that he didn't want to venture out? But he continues painting. But he makes this whole series of these indoor paintings with a year or so after his wife passed away. So this one is a still life called Apples and Grapes, and it was painted within the year after his wife passed. And then here's two beautiful flower paintings that he did. The first one, oh, first a quote. Here's a great quote from Claude Monet in his own words. I perhaps owe having become a painter to flowers. So, hey, if that's what he thinks his artistic aspirations came from, makes sense because you see flowers over and over again in his painting. So, a little bit of insight there. And here's a beautiful painting of sunflowers, but again, it's indoor work. And he does this. I'm showing you three examples that are just at the Met. There's many, many more of these indoor paintings that he did the year or two after his wife passed away. So kind of interesting in that regard. Not that he didn't do these indoor still lifes at other point in times in his career, but he did like an overabundance of them at this point in time. So really interesting in that regard.
And there's a greater element of darkness in these.
Yeah, they're not quite as cheery like flower
Right.
painting. I'm not saying it's uh depressing painting of flowers, but this wasn't like to me have that X factor that some of his other works do. Now maybe it's because I'm over analyzing because I know the story that's taking place here, but they're not quite as like vivid as some of the other like floral paintings that you see either from him or from other people. Although this one I think is a little more cheerier, but then also this is quite a ways after his wife passed away. So beautiful painting of chrysanthemums and really talented to kind of get the flowers are beautiful in themselves, but really kind of talented to be able to get the sheen on the furniture here.
Mm. And again, see light starting to come back into it. Shadow, light and shadow is a huge theme of if you're trying to portray the effects of light.
Yeah, making more of an appearance here. An avid gardener, Monet produced some 20 floral still lifes between 1873 and 1883, garnering both critical and commercial success. This painting was exhibited together with the museum's bouquet of sunflowers at the Gallery Durand Rule. So this gallery was owned by a friend of Monet's, and it's where many of his paintings were sold. So if you can imagine going to a art gallery in Paris and seeing this painting and say, "Oh, I like that. I think I'll take it home and hang it in my living room or my parlor or whatever."
Yeah, you get in that one you get this that impression of the dance of light and dark and different textures and
Yeah, he's kind of getting back to his
yeah, the
uh
table is very solid, the flowers are very um romanticized
mhm.
and the shadow is undeniable.
And then here they are two side by side. So one of the great things of for a lot of great museums don't actually have any Claude Monet paintings. And it's incredible though the Met has so many. And it's really also incredible that you can go and look at two paintings like this side by side hanging on the wall of the museum because you can't do that at every art museum throughout the world. But they have a big collection of Monets. And these are the still lifes. Any other thoughts on these, Brad or Patty?
Well, the one on the right, I mean, one of the amazing things in that whole shadow and light thing is the fact that those two lowest chrysanthemums are also reflected in the surface of the table they're on.
Oh yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's a little bit more uh, difficult, I would think, to accomplish than that big solid vase. If do you see
Hmm.
what I'm saying? The contrast between the solidity of the vase and the flowers, and yet he's portraying the reflection of both of them. That was what I meant, reflection, not shadow.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Brad, what about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with Patty on the reflection on that. The chrysanthemum is really outstanding. He's still got the shadow from the sunflower, but nowhere near as much.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
less reflection in the sunflower and the fruit.
And of course, the fruit's on a towel, so any reflection from that table is covered.
mhm. Well, here's a great point from Patricia I never thought about. She said, yeah, he's another reason why he might be painting these indoor still lifes. He's at home minding the kids. Yeah, that does make perfect sense because he needs to do that. And as the kids maybe get a little bit older, they don't maybe require as much attention. So, I never thought about that, but yeah, that's a good point.
Also, you're not going to have fresh fruit and flowers in the winter, but we haven't gotten to it yet, but we know Mr. Monet and most of those other artists weren't too crazy about being outside when it was cold.
Yeah, they don't have Whole Foods yet, so you can't just run down there and get pomegranate whenever you want.
We're only
Yeah, other of his paintings
got
indicate that he
four.
was very affectionate with his children.
Mhm. Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
because
he's got
I remember talking to my mom, and she was born in the 1930s, about how, yeah, for most of her life, you just couldn't go down to the grocery store 365 days a year and buy some grapes because they just weren't in season, and not available. Whereas like now, you can pretty much go get anything at any point in time, whatever your fancy is. So, all right, well, let's continue on. Here's some, so again, more paintings of water. Monet grew up as a teenager in the Normandy coast. He would return there frequently and make many, many depictions of things there. So this is a cabin. Unfortunately, the cabin's no longer there, but this was a customs cabin where they would, put customs on goods that were being imported. It's along the Normandy coast. And once again, water making an appearance in the seascape. And then this is a famous rock formation in northern France. It's very distinctive because it has this hole in it. And he ends up painting this numerous times. And just so happens that two of the many paintings he did of this spot are in the collection at the Met. So here it is in a photograph in more recent times. And you can see why that would get someone's attention as a very unique geographical feature.
Degenerating quite badly in modern times.
Yeah. Well, they have a
erosion.
few. They have a few different outcroppings, I guess you would call them, like this along the coast. But again, he's going back to, okay, the light and the water and the color and etc.
Just the sense of activity is different from much different from the photograph.
Yeah, and you don't see people in the bottom one and the right one. I mean, you do kind of see the human element with the cabin and the boats in the distance, but you don't see people playing a
But I'm
prominent role.
saying the life of the water and the formation, the photograph does not convey that, whereas the two
Mhm.
paintings, the formation, there is a sense of life in the two rock formation paintings that is just not there in the photograph. And you talk a lot in your programs about why would you still paint if you had photographs.
And then, as I mentioned, so he traveled a lot especially for someone of his era. And so he went on a trip to the Italian Riviera, and look at these two paintings from his trip there. These are palm trees.
And again, not typical of what you think of when you say Riviera paintings.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I would if I'd never seen this painting before and I had to guess where it was done at, I wouldn't have guessed the Italian Riviera. But that being said, he's venturing out, trying different things. Here's another one. This is a valley scene. There's a similar painting to this one at the Dallas Museum of Art for our friends in Texas that may have seen that.
Well, somebody just said these are similar to the Gaspé, or reminiscent of the Gaspé Peninsula in Canada.
Hmm.
Exactly, not exactly your typical Italian Alps painting.
All right, so I guess these two paintings, I would kind of just can't really categorize them other than he's making like a transition point at this particular spot in his career. Up until now, we've seen a fair number of people in his paintings. Now, we haven't really seen a lot lately. But that being said, if you think about all the works that we've seen from the beginning with the doctor, painting of his doctor, up until now, there's been a fair number. Granted, his wife was a few of them and things like that, but really this is amongst the last paintings he made of a person. This was actually one of his stepdaughters, and so he's going to transition, not that he dislikes people, but he's really just going to focus on other things besides people. And this one too is also interesting to me, but it's getting much more abstract. Like you can kind of tell, okay, yeah, this is water along the shore, but it's got to get a little more impressionistic. uh, Impressionism itself is a little bit more abstract, but it's really kind of starting to go to a whole nother level here. So he ends up remarrying a young lady named Alice, and she has an interesting story. Her husband was actually a patron of Claude Monet. Her husband was a wealthy owner of a series of department stores in France. And because he had money, he actually bought several Claude Monet paintings. Um, and then uh, around the time that Monet's wife died, Alice's husband, the department store dude, he ran off and left her. And she had several kids. She had six kids, or no, she had, let's see, one, two, three, four. She had five kids, or no, four kids. Sorry, can't even remember how many she had, and he had two. So then when his wife died and her husband left her, they ended up forming a romantic relationship, and it was kind of almost sort of like the Brady Bunch. And the merged families got together, and he was married to Alice for an extended period of time. But again, you don't really see a lot of paintings of people after this point in time. Now, he ends up living and painting to 1926. This work is done in 1887. That's pretty much going to be the end of people being depicted. And even here, it's not just random people, it's his stepdaughters. And two of them were particularly interested in artwork. And so here, this is at not at the Met, but the other side of the country at the LA County Museum of Art. This is called In the Woods at Giverny. Blanche at her easel and Suzanne reading. So Blanche and Suzanne, stepdaughters of Monet's. And so this is Claude Monet. This is Alice, the two Monet sons, and then Alice's, I believe she had five children, and there's five people in the picture. And then this one is at the Met. This is Suzanne, the stroller from 1887. And there's fewer portraits of people in later years, but they have these two, one at the Met, one at the LA County Museum of Art. And again, kind of interesting, compare and contrast these two.
Suzanne is the one that eventually married his son.
Yes, I believe so.
Because somebody had mentioned earlier that although the younger son gets a lot of credit for doing all the arranging, that she also had a lot to do with the memorialization of his work.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, he got a lot of help from his family, especially later in his life when his health was deteriorating. But I
And
really
she
like.
carried the
Oh, go
state for
ahead.
a while, didn't she?
Oh yeah, yeah. But I really like this painting a lot. It's got great colors and it's a nice vertical depiction of her. And then these are the rapids. This is a location in central France. Once again, water as a subject matter. He had done other paintings that were this abstract, but you're really going to see a shift after this. It's really going to move more abstract, in my opinion. So you can be on the lookout for that. So kind of a transitionary phase. And then, all right, speaking of abstract, let's look at these paintings of the Seine and notice, okay, here you can kind of get a sense of, okay, it's the river and the rapids and the rocky shore. When you get to these ones, though, these are much more abstract. Like you can maybe tell that, okay, these are water scenes and there's fog and winter weather and stuff like that. But you kind of have to process it for a little bit longer than you do the earlier works. So this is called Ice Flows. And as Brad was mentioning earlier, Claude Monet famously did not like cold weather. And so you figure he must have really liked this scene to want to put on his coat and go out there and do this painting. And once again, water is the subject. Here we are again along the Seine, 1897, much more abstract than the earlier works that we've seen. And then here's another one, Morning at the Seine. So this particular one, he wrote letters about how he used to get up early in the morning, even before the light came out. So he kind of gets set up and get his canvas and his easel and his brushes all ready to go. So that as soon as the light appeared on the horizon, he'd be all set and ready to go. And so this one, maybe not quite that early in the morning, but that being said, it is a morning scene along the Seine at Giverny.
My guess is actually that it's before sunrise. It's the sky as the sun is just before it starts to pop over the horizon.
Yeah, just
Because
before it's coming up.
the trees are
It's not
dark.
really that bright. Yeah, the trees are dark. It's not really that bright. Patty, you've made interesting commentary before about this era of his works. Any additional thoughts on these? I went through these a little bit fast because we have so many um, paintings to look at today. But any particular thing jump out at you on these?
Well, he's positioned kind of like I am, a major river at the ocean, and his ability to depict this, it's almost like the fog that you get at that kind of a setting is alive. And I've described it before as like some giant being that is literally slowly breathing in and out, because that's the way the fog moves, as though there's something alive in it. And it really does amazingly affect the what you can see, the shapes and contours, and it changes from second to second. He really does a great job depicting both the morning light on the water and the fog effects. There are times I just go outside just to be in that sense of the breathing fog.
Oh yeah, wow, that's neat.
And there are
I think,
people
oh,
who literally strive to take videos of it that convey it well.
oh yeah, well that's cool. But again, if you go back to these ones, these are both nice. These are nice also, but in a different way, and just how much more abstract they are. Than I mean, we have seen abstraction in Monet's work, but not to this extent before. And you're going to see more and more of this because to me, these really kind of start to see hints of where he's going to go artistically with his paintings of the garden at Giverny. And throughout his life, you have to remember Monet painted for decades and he's experimenting constantly with different types of things and different styles and subjects and colors and things like that. So you really get a sense of that here. Brad, any thoughts on the Sen paintings?
No, I'm looking at the fog with great remembrances of my youth. But
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
well, when we lived in New England, we had a lot of it in the morning.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
And
Well, that makes sense.
down here, when you get it, it's pea soup, and you don't go anywhere for a while. Very rare.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting that the certain areas have a unique relationship with fog. Well, you're not on a coastal area where river and ocean meet, are you either?
No, I've got a big river very close to me, but it's not one that it's the Potomac, the upper,
Yeah.
so it's not the big mighty river you see down in DC. It's a little smaller, but it's still a good size.
I think that's part of what creates the fog is the differential between the land, the river, and the ocean water. It's a huge temperature differential happening all the time.
Hmm.
Yep, I think you're right.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Well, that's good. You were learning all kinds of stuff today, not just art.
Where you
Um,
are, Patty, you have the Merrimack going into the Atlantic, right?
The Merrimack is south of here, and this is the Piscataqua.
Piscataqua, okay.
It's a
how do you
huge river. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do you spell that? No, I'm just kidding.
Isquatua, I think.
Okay. We've kind of seen this before where Monet is doing these different paintings of the same subject. but kind of on a limited basis. Later on in his career, he really gets into this where he's fascinated by depicting the same scene at different times of day. And I don't just mean like, two or three paintings. I mean like dozens. And he does that here with the poplars, the haystacks, and the Rouen Cathedral. He also does it with the train station in Paris, although we don't have a example at the Met. So what he's trying to do here, he's showing the same subject, but at different times of the day, different seasons of the year, and different weather effects. And we kind of have seen him do that before. Remember the paintings along the shore or those ones we just saw at the Seine. But again, not doing two or three paintings like that, but doing 15, 20, 25, 30. And so this is why the poplars, the haystacks, and the Rouen Cathedral paintings are such well-known works by Monet, just because the volume of works that he did of these same subjects is really credible. So, all right, so this is a funny story. He sees these poplar trees, and now at this point in time, Monet is living in Giverny, but he hasn't set up the water lily garden yet. So he's doing paintings in Giverny, but not of the garden because the garden doesn't exist at this point in time. So he's traveling around the countryside, looking at different things and finding images or subject matter. He ends up doing 24 of these poplar paint, 24 paintings of these poplar trees. Now, funny story, he saw these trees and thought they would make a great set of paintings, but then he discovers that some guy bought the trees and was going to cut them down to use the lumber. And he, oh my God, oh no. And so he went and got in hold of the guy that bought the trees and basically rented them from the guy, like paid him money to not cut them down until he was finished with his paintings, because at this point in time, he's doing okay financially and he has the ability to do so. Just the fact that he wanted to make all these paintings before the trees were cut down is interesting. And then I always wonder, like, gee, these are such famous paintings. Whatever happened to the wood? Maybe it ended up, furniture or components of somebody's house or something like that. But we'll probably never.
Monet series of furniture, yes.
What's that? What's that, Patty?
Monet series of furnishings, yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's what they would do now.
Exactly.
Could
Well,
you
I was
imagine?
thinking the same thing, rent a view, as opposed to now you have all these zoning fights about people wanting their view preserved and somebody else wants to sell the land, and it's so just the concept of rent a view is kind of neat.
Oh yeah. But what happened to this poplar wood that was taken from these trees? We don't know. So here's the Met painting at the top, and then just for kind of comparison and contrast, here's some other poplar paintings that are from the series. Again, he does 24 of the paintings of the same subject, so you're seeing 5 of the 24. And what I find noteworthy is just the colors. Notice the ones on like the left side are much more lighter and brighter and warmer, and the one on the right is much more cooler and darker. And then the one at the Met is kind of somewhat in the middle. Like the foreground is kind of coolish with the darker colors, but the background is more lighter. So really interesting to kind of see him doing this approach here. And then another thing about Monet, he was really particular about his perspective. Remember before we were talking about like the elevated view and things like that. So here, he wanted the scene to be from this exact spot. And if he was on the opposite side of the shore, he was too far away. And so what he did is he got in a boat and he would park the boat in the river so that he could get this exact vantage point. Because if he's on the opposite bank, he's too far away. If he's right on the trees, he's too close. But he has to be in this very particular spot. And there's kind of numerous stories of Monet during his career doing this, where he's got to be in this one exact spot. He can't be a little bit closer, a little bit further away, a little bit to the left or the right. No, he's got to be right here. And so you see that taking place here with the boat.
Well, look at how essential that ring of trees and to the left background that shows up in every one of these series. So it really has an impact on how you see the poplars.
Yeah, oh yeah, and also too, I mean, it really adds like another dimension to the painting, because if you go back to this one, which I like a lot, I really like the colors in this one. It doesn't have that element of the warmer, lighter colors in the background, and then these ones, they're all warmer and lighter. So again, he's doing this 24 series of paintings, the same subject. Notice too, these are vertical paintings. This one's more of a square, so different kind of perspectives in that regard.
And that ring of trees is almost like a super highway in the background, but except it does change with each season and with the light because they are living trees. So that would be part of why his perspective would be important. Imagine if it was just those poplars and not the trees setting them off.
Yeah, it wouldn't be quite as visually interesting. And so yeah, if you can, this isn't the kind of boat that he used. I just needed an image, but he had a bigger boat where he could put like 4 or 5 canvases in it, paint them. And so he would work on one for like a few minutes, and then the sun would change, and then he would shift to another one. And then he's going through this process, and then he'd pack them up and take them back to the studio. And then I don't know, the next day or a few days later, he'd bring another batch out, work on them. So he's working over these 24 paintings over a period of several weeks. And then eventually the guy, he finished his painting and he let the guy cut the trees down. So here's a similar thing he's doing where same idea where, hey, same subject, but different times of day, different seasons of the year, and different atmospheric effects. So this is also done at Giverny. The haystacks, is 25 paintings in this one. Now this was a big financial success for him because at this point in time, he's doing well financially. I mean, he's not a millionaire or anything, but he's doing well. The haystacks were a big hit, and he got so much money from selling these haystack paintings, the series of them, that it led to him purchasing the property at Giverny. Up until then, he had been living there, renting it. So this was a very important set of paintings, not only professionally for Claude Monet, but personally as well. Again, he doesn't like cold weather, so the fact that he's going out here and venturing out in the cold because he wants to have a depiction of the haystacks with the snow is noteworthy. Again, very, someone used a good word, meticulous. That was from Catherine. Thanks, Catherine. I appreciate that. Between 1890 and 1891, Monet devoted some 30 paintings to the haystacks in a field near his house at Giverny. He did 25 that were kind of in the same style, and then he did a handful that were a little bit different, but they kind of grouped together sometimes. In the midst of this effort, he wrote to the critic Gustave Geoffroy, "I'm working very hard, struggling with a series of different effects, haystacks. But at this season, the sun sets so fast, I cannot follow it." Because, you know, one thing you have to keep in mind when you're making an oil painting, it takes a long time. It's a very laborious process, and the sun's light is changing on it. And that used to frustrate him. The sun sets so fast, I cannot follow. The more I continue, the more I see that a great deal of work is necessary in order to succeed in rendering what I seek. So he's got this vision in his head. He's trying to create it. Haystacks was the first group of paintings that Monet exhibited as a series in 1891. 15 were shown at the Galerie Durand in Paris. And then the paintings are not together for any of these series. They're split up in museums all over the world. But if you want to see a bunch of them put together, you should go to the Art Institute of Chicago because they have 6 haystack paintings all in the same museum. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to our friends in and near Chicago. And then here's
Look at the length of the shadows, especially in the one that's probably autumn, because I don't know if people know, but like at the winter solstice, your shadow is the longest or tallest it's ever going to be, and at the summer solstice, it's the smallest. Look at that. You can almost be certain that's late autumn, that one up in the upper corner.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great point. No, it's just funny you mentioned that because that's actually my favorite of these 6. And then again, here's the one at the Met. And zoom in a little bit closer. And full view. Okay, so we saw the poplars, we saw the haystacks. We didn't get a chance to talk about the train station in Paris just because they don't have one of those paintings at the Met. But that also was a series, and this is another series, the Rouen Cathedral. He did this in 1894. It's a series of over 30 paintings. And remember, Monet is really fascinated by architecture. He's not just interested in landscapes and gardens, and it's another great depiction of light and color. And this one is also another funny story of his being meticulous. So here's the painting. And it's a famous cathedral in France, the Rouen Cathedral. Rouen is north of Paris on the Seine River. And okay, the Met one is on the top, and then other versions of this painting are on the bottom row. So these are at different museums throughout the world, including the National Gallery in London, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., among others. This one, in my opinion, a little bit more these are a little bit more closer together stylistically um, than the poplars or the haystacks, but you maybe don't have the same opinion. And okay, so here's what Monet is trying to accomplish. He's talking to a friend in a letter he wrote about the impact of light and color. Everything changes, even stone. So what he means by that is when the light is shining on this cathedral, it looks different. So the colors and the light change of the cathedral. And so everything changes, including the stone, which is noteworthy because you don't really think of stone as changing, but the look of it does. And then here's the cathedral itself. If you ever get a chance, you should visit this site. It's a really beautiful, fabulous, and amazing structure. And then, so Monet, he's trying to figure out, remember, he's meticulous, to use the word from earlier. So he's trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to position myself for all these paintings I want to make? And so he's walking around and he's like, okay, well, there's these buildings. So this is across there's like an open courtyard. So if you were to back up a little bit and turn around in Rouen, this is what you would see. So picture you're facing this building and then, so say this building that we're looking at is like 12 o'clock. The cathedral would be like over at like say the equivalent of like 5 o'clock if you know the hands on the clock, which you might not do. But anyway, he decides that the best position to be to make these paintings is inside this building right here. If he's outside the building, he's going to be too close. He doesn't want to be over here. He doesn't want to be over here. He wants to be right inside the building. Now the issue was the first floor was being occupied by a woman's lingerie shop. Now though, this is a big tourist center. So if you come visit here, they have tourist information that they hand out to things. But anyway, he's like, oh, I want to be inside the building, but the place where I want to be is a woman's lingerie shop. So what am I going to do about that? So he ends up going to talk to the proprietor of the woman's lingerie shop, a woman, and he explains who he is and what he's trying to do. He's like, hey, can I rent out like the corner of your shop and set up a bunch of easels there so I can make paintings of the cathedral? And would have loved to hear that conversation. But he pays her, and I guess she says yes because he ends up doing that. So for several weeks, he's kind of cordoned off this this uh, corner of this shop, this front corner, and there's people in there going about their business, and yet you got this guy over here making these paintings of the cathedral, which I don't know, me being skeptical, I would have thought maybe there was some other kind of weird thing going on, but no, he really seriously just wanted to be in this exact spot. He didn't want to be up here or up here. He needed to be down here. So that being said, this is probably the most famous set of paintings ever made in a lingerie store. I don't know, maybe there might be others that I don't know about, but I think these are the most famous ones.
Well, at least paint any of the ladies, Robert.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like, hey, well, he was very focused. He's not going to get distracted by the women in the lingerie. It shows you how meticulous and focused he is.
Well,
But
if
again,
you're the lingerie shop owner, you're thinking of this is Claude Monet. There might be a mutual benefit here.
yeah, exactly. And notice he's not doing paintings of women at this point in time. He's just strictly focused on the cathedral. So he was very determined in that regard. Didn't get distracted like many men would. But that being said, the cathedrals.
Oh, yeah,
What's
aren't
that?
cathedrals also referred to as she, though? They aren't major cathedrals considered more feminine than
Oh, I don't know. That's a good point. I never thought about that or heard that. But yeah, you might be right.
he's just painting different ladies.
Oh yeah. And then again, one of the things I wanted you to take away from this program is just kind of how diverse his subject matter was. He didn't just do flowers and gardens and landscapes. He did, people and architecture and water and boats and all this other stuff. And here's a great quote that really kind of sums up his approach to art. Every day I discover more and more beautiful things. It's enough to drive one mad. I have such a desire to do everything. My head is bursting with ideas. So pretty cool quote that kind of sums up what he was trying to accomplish as an artist. And again, these series, the Poplar series, the Haystack series, the Rouen Cathedral series, or the train station series. And while we've seen that before, he really focused on this for several years of his life. And then, as I mentioned before, Monet likes to travel. Two of his favorite places he visited was London, which he ended up going to many, many times. And then he made a visit to Venice. Now, unfortunately, he wasn't there in time for the Jeff Bezos, Lauren Sanchez wedding. But that being said, he still was able to make it there and check it out in person. So here you go. This is another series. It's the House of Parliament, and he's doing the effect of fog, done in 1903, 1904. And London was a favorite place of Monet, which is interesting to me because I'm an American, but it always seems like the French and the British have kind of like this rivalry. So interesting that a Frenchman would be so fond of London, but they've really adopted Monet. When you go to London, you actually see a lot of Monet stuff in museums and in stores, just because he was so fond of the place. But he ends up making over 100 paintings while during his different visits to London. Again, there's the water being depicted as a subject matter, and then he's really fascinated by architecture. If you're in London, you're going to be visiting there and want to be in the spot where Monet made these paintings. He didn't go in the boat this time. He determined that the vantage point from St. Thomas Hospital, which is along the river, would be adequate. And so he makes the paintings from there. And again, pretty abstract. We kind of saw him moving in that direction earlier.
Helen just mentioned that technically he is catching the early stages of lethal smog
Oh,
in
yeah.
London, which did become
Yeah.
a health crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have went to California when I lived in Los Angeles. A smog was a big deal.
Yeah, not for him, but it actually became a hazardous situation for Londoners for quite some time.
Oh, yeah.
Part of the 20th century, yeah.
And then this building is officially called the Houses of Parliament or the Palace of Westminster, although Americans and other tourists tend to call it Big Ben, but Big Ben is really just the clock tower piece. Now, this is a more recent photograph. I didn't take this picture myself, but okay, so here is this building. It's a really incredible structure to see up close in person. It had only been open for a few years when Monet ends up painting it. It wasn't like this had been here for 100 years earlier. And it's been a popular tourist attraction ever since. But if you look at this photo, like, okay, the person here, they captured the whole building, including the Big Ben on the right. And then here's another photo from a different vantage point, same thing. Okay, they've got the whole building. They even have the Big Ben over on the right, and the bridge and the river. Now, if you look at Monet's painting, though, he doesn't have the whole building. He only has the left side of it. Now, why is that? Why wouldn't he include all this other stuff? I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing. I think maybe he thought if he included the Big Ben, that would kind of distract people, because it might be because I'm an American, but when I look at this building, my eye always gravitates towards that. And then also, too, he's not interested in depicting what this building looks like per se. He's interested in showing you how the light interacts with the water and the surface of the building and stuff. And for that reason, he doesn't need to show you the whole image the way a photograph would. And you'll see this in his other paintings as well, that he did not only this area, but also of Venice. And so here's a similar one. This is in Venice, famous palace, and he did this in 1908. So he visited Venice. It's another funny story. He ends up visiting Venice with his wife on vacation. And he's not planning on doing any painting there. He's just planning on relaxing, enjoying himself. But he was so awestruck by the beauty of Venice that he ends up making 37 paintings while he's there. And most of them, again, feature water, but then also architecture. He's not really doing people per se. And Venice has been a popular tourist attraction for centuries. Now, Monet had to take the train there because they didn't have that whole airplane flight thing at that point in time. And so here's the building that he depicted. It's the palace on the right. He's really kind of not included the tower that goes with it. Again, maybe
Well, it is there, but it's very indistinct. See it way over on the left?
Yeah, right. It's very kind of subdued.
You don't say, oh, tower. It's sort of just there.
Yeah.
But again, looking at fog.
And so, yeah, you can see why Mr. Bezos chose this for his wedding location. Beautiful area. And it's really, we don't have time, but it's really neat to look at these Monet Venice paintings. I really love Venice and love Monet, and to see him doing the depictions of the city, really amazing. And again, here's more of what it looks like from a postcard type of picture versus the Monet scene.
Yeah, this one, the one on the left would be more of a travel poster.
Yeah.
And the one on the right is like, I was here. Picture.
And then here's a great quote from Monet on Venice. It's so beautiful. I console myself with the thought of returning next year, for I was only able to make attempts beginning. So he planned on coming back to Venice, but he never was able to do so. He only makes the one trip. But if you go back here, he did end up spending several weeks there between October and December of 1908. But yeah, he talked about Venice in letters he wrote to his friends back in France. And then when he got home, you're like, oh, wow, this place was so amazing. But like happens sometimes in life, he was not able to make a return visit. So if you go somewhere, you got to enjoy it while you can because you might not be able to revisit again.
Some of these quotes, along with the paintings, he strikes me. Now they have a name for it. It's called highly sensitive persons. But
It's called
some of
what?
these quotes, you can feel that ache to be able to express everything he's experiencing. I bet you he was one of those highly sensitive persons.
Oh, I see. That's neat. I never thought about that. But yeah, you can kind of tell he's a sensitive guy. Like, yeah, I went to Venice and drank a couple beers, and it was pretty cool. You can tell he's much more of a sensitive, introspective kind of person. You read these letters. Kind of same thing with Van Gogh and his letters.
And yeah, it affects them physically.
Hmm. So yeah, trips to, and remember before we saw him visiting the Italian Riviera, we saw him visiting Netherlands. He's doing these paintings all over different parts of France. So a well-traveled guy. And then, all right, let's talk about Giverny. We're kind of the home stretch of our program. Got a little bit more to go. Okay, so he ends up moving to Giverny. He rents the house initially, but then he ends up getting enough money to be able to purchase it. He ends up building this fabulous water lily garden, which becomes the subject matter of many of his later works. Notice there's no people whatsoever in any of these paintings, although you do see the bridge on the top left. And so, okay, we've seen all these great Monet paintings. Which artwork did he consider to be his masterpiece? And if you've seen my programs before, you know the answer to this because I always think it's fascinating. He said his masterpiece was not a painting, it was actually his garden at Giverny. So Monet was a very accomplished gardener, just being a talented painter, and he considered his garden to be his masterpiece. Imagine that. And here is the garden. So he didn't do the heavy labor, so to speak, of the garden, but he did spend a fair amount of time being kind of like the visionary of this. He did have assistance with the planning of it and the laying out of it, and of course the actual manual labor to build this. But this is really his vision, and for people that are really into gardening, the garden at Giverny is really considered one of the top gardens in the whole world, which is amazing when you consider he wasn't a professional gardener per se.
Even the pond was created. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah,
It wasn't a naturally existing pond body of
yeah. It did
water.
yeah? No, it didn't naturally exist there. So he bought this property and ended up creating this. And it's funny because I was reading a review of it many years ago before COVID, and some guy wrote something like, "Yeah, my wife dragged me here, and I'm not even into gardening or Monet, but that was really cool to see his garden." Uh,
Definitely.
so he ends up making, and then one of the reasons why he made it, he loved nature and plants and all that stuff, and he really wanted a place, particularly as he got older, that he could kind of, stay and have subject matter for great artwork that was close to home. Because Monet is a fascinating individual. On the one hand, he did love to travel, and he goes to all these different places, but he also was kind of a homebody. I mean, his favorite thing to do was really just to stay home with his friends and family and make paintings. And so when he sets up the garden here, he has all this great subject matter without leaving the comforts of home, so to speak. So this is one of the most famous later works. It's another series. He did a whole set of paintings on the bridge, the Japanese footbridge of the garden at Giverny. This is from 1899. Again, water making another appearance.
Isabel just said a great thing. His paintings are an homage to his masterpiece. I love that quote.
That is a great
Thank
quote.
you, Isabel.
I should include that in here. Thank you. Appreciate that. Here's a photo of him on the bridge. It's a colorized photo. It was initially a black and white photo. And then here's the museum card of this painting that you can read if you go visit in person. In 1893, Monet, a passionate horticulturist, remember he had those paintings of his wife in their garden at his previous home, purchased land with a pond near his property in Giverny, intending to build something, quote, for the pleasure of my eye and also for the motifs to paint, end quote. The result was his water lily garden. In 1899, he began a series of 18 views of the wooden footbridge over the pond, completing 12 paintings, including the present one that summer. The vertical format of this picture, unusual in this series, most of them are horizontal or square, give prominence to the water lilies and their reflections on the pond.
The other thing I love about this series is the other reflection he includes is the bridge. He
Oh
loved
yeah,
the bridge.
yeah, you can tell he was really proud of this bridge, which, hey, it's a cool bridge and he should be proud. I used to live in Washington, D.C., spent a lot of time at the National Gallery of Art. This is a similar painting that they had done around the same time with the Japanese footbridge. Notice this one is a square painting, though. The other one we saw was a rectangle that was vertical.
I think all but one or two of them have the reflection of the bridge, though.
Yeah, and so it's really fascinating that he's including that here. And also, too, later on, he eventually, so it's like he's infatuated with this bridge because he keeps painting it over and over again. But then at some point in time, he's like, okay, yeah, been there, done that, and doesn't include it anymore.
But it kind of agrees with Isabel's quote about an homage to his masterpiece.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Isabel. That was very cool. And then these paintings, as they get later in his career, now notice, okay, so this is painted 1914 to 1917. He passed away in 1926. Later on in his life, he starts having health issues of various types, including cataracts. So I guess to me, it's not surprising that the work becomes a little bit more abstract because his vision is deteriorating. But I believe even if he wasn't having vision problems, his artwork would have became more abstract on its own anyway, just because that was kind of the direction that he was going. So kind of the, in my opinion, the two things kind of merged together. But this is the path through the irises. No doubt the path you take to the water lily pond.
One of those unanswerable mysteries.
What's that?
One of those unanswerable mysteries, a chicken egg question, you know. It's,
Oh yeah,
it's like,
exactly. Abstract.
yeah.
Let's see. Okay, then here's another one. The water lily. I love the colors on this with the blues and the greens and the purples. This is from 1916, 1917. Again, water featured one more time. And then here's a photo of the garden. And I love the reflection of the water. You can't see the bridge in this one with the clouds, and then the water lilies themselves. This is really unique combination of all these different things taking place with the water and the lilies and the light and the reflection, and all those different things combined together. And then here is a painting from 1919. Now look at this. He's born in 1840. This is done in 1990. So he's 79 years old. I mean, and this is an era when people didn't normally live anywhere close to that age. So he really lived a long life.
And he was a dedicated smoker.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Maybe he would have lived longer without that. But again, the painting in comparison with the photograph, and you can kind of see like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see what he was trying to accomplish here. One of Monet's critics described this canvas of 1919 as water lilies in full flower asserting themselves, their golden discs encased in purple against the cloudy water. I like that's a nice quote, but I like Isabel's better. I'm going to replace this. This one would hurt. Although the almost 80-year-old artist was reluctant to part with recent paintings, he made this landscape in 3 related pictures with an eye to the market, meaning to sell, telling his dealers Gaston and Jos Burnham that he was, quote, working on them passionately. The Burnham brothers quickly purchased the quartet.
What did you say to that about that quote, Robert? I couldn't quite make out.
I said I like this quote, but I like Isabel's quote from earlier better.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. Yeah, and a lot of people, if you don't know, water lilies are in fact related in the same family as lotus. So there's like an Eastern connection there too that are considered very meditative and restorative.
I didn't know that. That's a interesting play on this. He was really fascinated by the Japanese and Asian things.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
Helen's also called floating lilies. Yep.
Owning all these. So, Brad and Patty, any final thoughts on the Giverny paintings? And we're actually
I,
getting in the home stretch. So, any thoughts on just Monet in general and or the Giverny paintings specifically?
well, I love the inclusion of the reflection of the clouds, but for some reason, it just thoroughly enchants me or tells me something about him that he does the reflection of the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's definitely an intimacy with his creation here.
Mm-hmm. So kind of a funny but also sad story. So I used to live in Washington D.C. and I used to give tours at the National Gallery of Art. And one day this woman came in, and I was talking to one of the security guards that I got to know there. And this woman comes in, an Asian woman, and she's looking like really distraught. And I'm the security guard. Are you okay? Can I help you? And she's like, "Where's the Monet painting of the bridge?" And he's like, "Oh, it just shipped out 2 weeks ago. It's on loan to another museum." And the woman was like, "Oh my God, I'm here on vacation from Japan. I'm only here for a week. This was like the number one painting I wanted to see in your collection." It's like, "Oh God, sorry." So
Lesson in
right.
planning trips.
Yeah, so she was visiting Japan break from the school and really wanted to see this Monet painting of the water lily bridge at the National Gallery of Art, but unfortunately it was on loan to another museum. So anyway, kind of a funny, sad story. But Brad, any final thoughts on the
Well,
Giverny paintings or Claude Monet in general?
that last story sums it up because I mean, a lot of people would be looking for that bridge as a logo for the Giverny series.
Yeah, I saw this woman and I thought, did she lose like her phone or a child? I mean, she looked really distraught and she's pacing around. Because if you go to the National Gallery Art website, their website will tell you like what gallery the paintings are in. And
Yeah,
but they do loan out works or they put them in conservation or whatever. But yeah, looking at her like, oh my
yeah.
God, what's wrong with this young lady? And then when he started talking to her, like, oh God. So anyway, and I don't think
There
what's that?
are there are exhibits from time to time that borrow from other collections too.
Yeah, that's why if you really have your heart set on seeing one particular work, you you gotta go, you gotta check to make sure it's there. Although they had a lot of other cool stuff, so probably
A
worth
lot of famous artworks get loaned out. Like when we had the um, World's Fair in New York, they brought articles from Italy and all over
it.
the world.
Mona Lisa.
Exhibits there. They
Oh
brought
yeah, the Mona Lisa when it came to America back in the
La,
60s. Yeah.
La Pietà came. A lot of things came. I mean,
Mhm.
that fit.
Just a
Oh
few
yeah.
years ago, the Isabella Stewart Gardner, because she had the only Titian. It was from the mythology series that was in America, and they did a special exhibit. They brought the other three from that mythology series. The one that lives in America is the Rape of Europa.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great thing. But I mean, yeah, it's a good thing when you can go see other works at museums close to your house. But that it's always tough when a favorite ends up leaving. And then Monet ended up passing away. He lived a long life. He was born in 1840, passed away in 1926. But that was a really long time for someone born in 1840. And then if you're in New York City, so we saw 40 Monet paintings at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But if you're in New York, you can go see 10 more because the Museum of Modern Art has 5 Monet paintings. The Brooklyn Museum has 3 Monet paintings. The Guggenheim has one. Frick also have one. So you can see 50 Monet paintings in New York City. So how about that? And then, so
If
again,
that grave is the
what's
same.
that?
Do you know if his grave is at Giverny or is it with his wife?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so his grave, along with his second wife, is at Giverny, the church there, which is not far from his home. So yeah, his first wife is buried at the other place, and Monet and his second wife are buried here.
Here
Good question.
reposes our friend Claude Monet.
Oh yeah, yeah. I forgot to mention that. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. And then yeah, if you go back, so wow, we really covered a lot of artwork looking at these 40 paintings, but it was the early years. And then we do the pre-impressionism, the early impressionism, more early impressionism.
What an extraordinary career.
Yeah, really amazing. Vitoy, this is where the first wife is buried. The still lifes after she passed away. Normandy, Italian Riviera.
That looks like the Gaspé Peninsula.
Transitions, for lack of a better word. The Seine. The series Poplars, Haystacks in the Rouen Cathedral. London and Venice. And Giverny. So again, really wanted you to take away like, wow, yeah, this guy did a lot of different types of stuff. It wasn't just flowers and gardens and landscapes. And these are just the paintings at the Met. If you were to do a similar view of other Monet paintings in other collections, you really get a appreciation for just how diverse of interests he had in depicting different things. Even though he kind of reminds you of like an actor or an actress that is in a handful of movies that people kind of associate with, but then don't realize like the full body of their work, so to speak. So we'll wrap things up in just a little bit. But Brad and Patty, any final thoughts on Claude Monet before we call it a day?
Well, your description of his career made me think of like Angela Lansbury, Maggie Smith, those people. It's like they played very different roles throughout their careers and they progressed as they aged, but the average person would tend to know only whatever their contemporary period was. They wouldn't really realize how different those actors and actresses had been.
Oh
So
yeah, like that.
that's one.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, it reminds me of like Gene Hackman when he just passed away. They're like, oh, the French Connection and all this stuff, Mississippi Burning, but he was really in all these really amazing movies, and a few of them I'd actually forgotten about until they were doing like the retrospective of his life and kind of.
Way the talent. I mean, one of Angela Lansbury's earliest movies, she was kind of a shady character in
Oh yeah,
Gaslight, and
wow.
but yet years later, she's portraying this nice old lady that solves mysteries, and it was like, whoa, okay, they transition a great deal.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Oh yeah. Brad, what about yourself? Any final thoughts on Claude Monet before we call it a day?
No, I think that this has really been a good summary of what we've got here, and he's he's obviously progressed through his career and invented a whole art form of impressionism along with his colleagues. It's his works are just phenomenal. This Italian Riviera on the right almost looks like the Dolomites.
I didn't make that connection, but yeah, you're right. But yeah, that's
so,
why it's neat to look at a set of paintings like this, just because you get more appreciation for their range, so to speak. What was that, Patty?
one thing I'm curious about, I know you've done a great program on the actual property at Giverny, and is that on the YouTube channel too? Because several people
Oh,
have mentioned
yeah,
they
no,
love.
I didn't record that yet, but I was going to do it at some point in time in the near future. So yeah, we do like a virtual tour of the property at Giverny, both the inside of the house, the outside. But yeah, we need to do that again. We haven't done that one in a while.
Yeah, stay tuned, folks. We'll get to that one too, because it's
All right.
interesting to see the connection between his actual life and how he depicted it in the paintings.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, definitely agree with you on that. So hey, if you're in New York City or going to be visiting and you want to see like a similar program for other artists at the Met, this is actually the fourth one we've done on Impressionism at the Met. So the first one was Manet. Gosh, I think we did that like 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Uh,
Wow.
then we did Degas and Renoir and then the Monet one. So these three are all on our YouTube channel. And then this one I'm recording today. I'll put it on there. It might take me a few days though because I'm super busy at work, but I'll get it posted there. As soon as it's posted, I'll send out the link. So if you want to see more of the Impressionism collection at the Met, we'll do that soon. And then for the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I'm doing a series next year on the American collection. at the Met, but that'll be a little ways away. And then if you want more about Monet, this is the third of the series we've done at Monet at different museums. So we did one just like this at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And then let's see, last year we did Monet at the Art Institute of Chicago. And then today's one is at the Met. So there's 3 of those for you. And then here are some of the paintings by Monet at the National Gallery of Art. One of my favorite places.
Oh yeah, there's the one on the hilltop that everybody can feel the air.
Yeah, the bottom left. And then
Yes.
here's another one. Monet paintings at the Art
Oh, the
Institute.
locations, yes.
So they have a lot more Monet paintings than just these 6 at the National Gallery of Art, and more than just these 6 Art Institute of Chicago, but just to give you a sense of what those look like. But again, you can find them on our YouTube channel. I'll email out the link when the Met one becomes available. And our YouTube channel is called Washington, D.C. History and Culture. Thank you for all of the people that have viewed our programs. 1.3 million people, very flattering. And oh, by the way, my mom thinks that's really cool. So thank you very much. And then here's a my son, who was so soft-spoken when he was younger, talking for these people. And then here's my favorite quote by Claude Monet. Everyone discusses my art and pretends or tries to understand, especially that Robert Kelleman guy. If it were even necessary to understand, when all that is real and necessary is just to love. So great Claude Monet quote that really kind of sums up the essence of what he's all about. And then just FYI, some future programs we have coming up if you're watching us live. Let's see, I guess this is 2 weeks from now. We're doing an encore of our George Caleb Bingham program. He was a great American artist. So on Friday evening, July 11th, we'll be watching a film about Bingham. And then on Saturday, July 12th, we watch having a lecture like this about his career. And then I used to work at the Detroit Institute of Arts. They have a fabulous collection, including this great John Singer Sargent painting, which is a kind of a complimentary work to Madame X, if you're familiar with that painting. And we'll be talking about their American collection on Thursday evening, July 12th. And for our friends in New England, we did this program a long time ago, right when COVID started, but I've been kind of tinkering with it, and I finally have it to a point where it's finished. At some point in time in the next few days, we'll have the date for our Museum of Fine Arts Boston Impressionism collection program. So you can be on the lookout for that.
For the sake of clarity, Robert, you have Saturday, July.
Oh no,
12th.
these are the same dates. Oh, sorry, this must be the wrong date. I think it's like the 20. It's the 20 something. So whatever. See, it must be the 24th. Sorry about that.
Yeah, the 11th would be Friday because the 4th is on Friday.
Yeah. So sorry about that. But yeah, and then Patty, are you familiar with the collection at the Museum of Fine Arts? I mean, I know you're not in the same state, but it is a New England place, and I've heard you reference the museum before. I mean, I know you talked about the Isabella Stewart Gardner.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time there. I haven't been there recently. I'm getting older, Robert. It's not as fun, a fun idea for me to, go through all the effort to get to some of these places sometimes and then do the museum itself. But yeah, it's a great museum. I mean, I used to go all the time on how some museums have, the free late day or evening.
Oh yeah, free day. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to go a lot just for that but it's impossible. I mean, it's one of those museums you have to visit more than one time and know what you want to see on that visit,
Oh, I see. Oh wait, no, on this slide the date's correct. When did that happen?
I didn't even know. Oh, did you change it?
I fixed it. Anyway, Thursday, July 4th. But yeah, so some things coming soon. So hopefully we'll see you then. All right. Well, that concludes our program. Thanks so much for joining us. If you're interested, I'll play a preview of our George Caleb Bingham program. He was known as the Missouri artist. Thank everyone for joining us, especially Patty and Brad for sharing your time and expertise with us. So thanks everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.